Welcome back to the Chasing Happiness podcast, an honest podcast about finding happiness, what it really means, and the process of getting there. My name is Crystal, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Matt Zinman, a wonderful author who I met through Clubhouse, which listeners of this podcast will not be surprised to hear. And Matt has a lot of stuff that I think could be beneficial to everyone listening to this podcast. So, Matt, I'm going to hand it over to you to give yourself a few minutes just to tell the listeners from Chasing Happiness sort of who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure. Well, it's great to be with you, Crystal. It's never a bad leading question. It's like, well, let me tell you about me. So I'll keep it pretty top line. I've been running and had run a nonprofit for the past 15 years called the Internship Institute that got sidelined by COVID. And internships, apprenticeships, just the same, for your Canadian
Right.
followers. And so at the same time, I also published a book called Z-isms, Insights to Live By. And that's based on just a lot of concepts I wanted to speak to in and around mindset and well-being and personal relationships. And then up into the whole life and legacy, finding your why, talking about gratitude.
Right.
Certainly career is a major topic for me from my other experience. And then the whole idea of it is to come out with some practical, action items so that, it's more than just the book. And then since then, although it wasn't planned, but because the nonprofit got sidelined, I just kept leaning in. So I started my own podcast called Insights to Live By that I just celebrated my 50th episode
Woohoo.
a couple weeks back. I know it's surreal. And now have developed courses, one called the Life Upgrade and another called the Mindset Reset, which is the smallest version of the Life Upgrade. And I'm just psyched. I mean, I've been in development for all this time, and now I get to share it with the world. So I'm just so happy to be here with you. Thank you.
I am so happy to have you. I have been slowly working my way through all of your stuff, podcast, courses, everything that you have. And as I said, we sort of met on Clubhouse, which listeners to this podcast on a regular basis know I'm spending an awful lot of my time in Clubhouse. But I think part of the reason why it's such a great platform is because no matter where you are in the world, you can gain exposure to people like yourself who you may otherwise never have crossed paths with. And when I took your course, the first one that I took, the Mindset Reset, I had said to you, I don't think it really matters who you are, sort of what journey you're on in this life, how much education you have, whether you work in the mental health field. There is something you can take away from this course. There is something you will learn about yourself, something that you feel like you have benefited from regardless of situation. So I'm so excited to talk to you today. But I want to start with sort of why this happened. And you touched a little bit on it because, COVID, like it did for most people, sort of
Right.
upheaved your life. And so you've kind of gone down this path. But I know because you and I have talked a little bit personally, you've sort of been on this personal journey for a while. You've just now started to turn it into a career because of COVID.
Yeah, it's part of the book itself is a chapter on swimming with the current and trusting your intuition. And it really just went that way for me, and especially for the nonprofit, even aside from COVID. It's just, it's one of the hardest things I could have imagined trying to do, even though I was slogging through for 15 years. I had a lot to show for it, but it's uphill every step of the way. And just the way things happened and coming out with the book, which also came out the same time as COVID. So my launch parties, all of that went by the wayside, which is fine. Just everything seemed to be going my way. And I fell into the podcast. It wasn't anything I'd planned on doing. And I love it. I've never been happier. And, now to bring everything to fruition, I'm psyched. And I appreciate what you said, Crystal, about, everybody benefiting from the course. And people ask me that. And, I think it's less of a who as it is a when, because
Right.
not everybody is really at a place in their lives where they're committed to that kind of
Sure.
life upgrade, mindset reset, whatever you would want to interpret that as, but it really is an hour a day. So life is busy, but you still have to be able to commit an hour a
Right.
day. And that really is often when someone is in transition that they're looking to really work on themselves. So thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the things that I found, especially now that I've moved into the second part of your course, is I sort of am scheduling the time the same way I would schedule a meeting like you and I sitting down today. From this time to this time, that's what I'm devoting to it. Because I think the further you get into this kind of self improvement work, regardless of what it is, the more interested you become, the more devoted to devoting the time you become, because you see the benefits, you feel the benefits, the people around you notice the benefits of you doing this self improvement work. So it's highly beneficial for everyone.
Yeah, thank you. And one of the things I really love about it, quite honestly, is that the vehicle of a book has limitations.
Sure.
And so to be able to broaden it out in terms of wanting it to be practical and life impacting, putting in the form of the course, creating all the activities and everything that is, and the videos and whatnot in and around it, just gives it a whole different feel that brings it to life in a way that I had never originally anticipated in writing the book. So I mean, I'm all the happier about that.
I love that. And writing a book, especially, let's talk prior to COVID for a moment. Writing a book is a lot of work. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And then you sort of hype it up to be this almost huge release, this celebration into the world of this is the thing that I spent however long creating. But then you unfortunately had COVID to deal with, and that sort of celebration doesn't happen in the same way. So, how did you try to deal with that? Because there must have been a lot of mixed emotions about this thing you had put so much effort into.
Well, sure. There are disappointments just like anything, whether it's the book or, whatever life throws me. There's a
Mhm.
whole concept that has evolved since called happiness, which, I look forward to speaking more about as we move on in the conversation. But at its core, it's really about having a reflex of positivity. And that's something that evolved from it. And of course, in writing a book like this, I'm sharing a lot of myself, one of which is that I've had to contend with depression, since my teens. It's shaped my life in any number of ways. And so I have to keep reminding myself that optimism and pessimism apply to the same set of circumstances. So while we don't
Right.
have a choice of what happens to us, we do have a choice of how we react. And I've just always been that way, except when I'm depressed. But naturally speaking, that's just my mentality and my character trait. That whenever anything comes my way, I'm looking for the silver lining. So it's like, okay, well, uh, what's going to happen happens. Now I'm going to turn the ship and do a lot more podcast interviews, which I've been loving. So um, maybe I wouldn't have gone in the same direction as I am now, and just looking for the silver lining and enjoying it.
That's awesome. And I love that you brought up sort of how you personally have had this shift to try to look at the positive unless you're like really deep in your depression, because I think mindset is really important for people, especially right now. I know here in Canada, we're dealing with lockdown after lockdown after lockdown. Things are a little bit different for you guys in the States based on sort of where you live and how things have been handled. But I know people are reaching sort of the end of their rope here, and people have had enough and want to get back to whatever normal life is going to be after all of this. And I think the mindset part is going to play a really big role for a lot of people in the next year or two as we get back to whatever that new normal is. So, can you speak to me a little bit about how you figured out that the mindset part was such an important part of moving forward in your life, whether it was while you were battling depression or after you had come out of it?
Yeah, there are, I didn't write the book to write the book, and I'm not a coach. So it's not meant to be my business card per se, with all due respect to anybody who writes a book for different reasons. I originally I wrote it because I feel and that and know now all the more that through my experiences, which add up. I mean, I'm heading for mid 50s now. That there are things that have always served me well, and I just decided to get into action, and then I would know whether or not it was a book or maybe it was a blog, but it was more fully formed. And this whole concept of happiness really incorporates a lot of the aspects of the book. The first being that to the point just made in and around depression is self-kindness. And one of the main things about it is that anyone who's into personal development, you think of these different areas or goals that you set around self-esteem and self-confidence and self-respect and of course self-love. These are all things naturally we strive for. And you can say, well, I kind of feel, cruddy about myself, but
Right.
they can be very vague. It's, how do I get from here to there? And so I really have always felt that self-kindness was really that missing building block, because it's a this or that. You're either being kind to yourself or you're not. And it really makes it tangible. It creates that barometer, creates a line in the sand. And for me, it also is about self-forgiveness, all things negativity. Because in order to practice, in order to have that reflex of positivity, you have to live in the present. And so
Right.
self-kindness is one of the two major ways that you can release your past. It's not kind to yourself to hold on to resentments or regrets or anger and whatever that baggage may be. And so drawing that line in the sand immediately, although it's not like anybody can flip a switch, does make it very tangible as to whether it's a this or that. So you really start out with the question, why be anything less than kind to myself? And that should be a pretty affirmative answer. And if it's not, then you know where to start as well. And then the other side of it is it's very easy to get caught up in future uncertainties around worry and anxiety. Even making assumptions are all things that take you away from the present into future thinking and projecting about things that are uncertain, which is a complete waste of also negative
Right.
energy. So you really have to use these things. And when I talk about earned confidence, it comes from another major life experience that has served me well. And you talk about the ultimate way of turning something into a positive is that in my early 20s, we knew that my mom was sick somehow. We didn't know what was up, and we got to a family meeting, and it was with a therapist, because we were really bracing, and we found out tragically she contracted HIV in routine surgery and a blood transfusion just in that time period before they knew what was what. And she got the worst of it. There weren't any drug cocktails or anything that's going to prolong, and it was of course very, very as difficult as it gets, to see her through that over a period of years, and as she deteriorated. And then of course with anything like that, and you get into certain circumstances where you think, well, she's not going to make it, and then you'd cycle through that anguish
Right.
around just holding your breath all the time. And it really got to the point where thank goodness she pulled through any number of times. But what am I doing to myself? Like, I can only deal with the real. It really is a what will be scenario. And I had to force myself into that. And that's really where earned confidence came from, is to recognize that really for all of us, it's not a competition about who's got what baggage through their lives. We all have it. And the reality is that we're still standing. And the fact of the matter is, as simple as it sounds, is that having been through everything that we have in our lives, we've proven to ourselves quite directly that we're fully capable
Right.
of coping with and overcoming whatever happens to us, and as if we have a choice. So knowing that, it's kind of a logic formula, the same way as self-kindness is about your past. Why do you have anything to worry about? You can handle what comes your way. Just let it unfold and deal with the real. And so again, you have to kind of train yourself in and around. I mean, these are life skills in and around happiness. You're not going to be able to stop the habits that go into what makes you worry or what have you. And that's the big stuff in terms of your past baggage or future uncertainties. But I can't say all, many of us have a tendency to just be doing this routinely in any given day. So I could get off this podcast and I'd be like, why did I say that to Crystal?
Right.
And I'll be recycling through my head for an hour, or I'll be feeling bad about myself, where I'm making an assumption about something uncertain. that I might have said something that might have insulted you, or I sounded dumb to your audience, or whatever that may be. And you know what? That can happen too, in terms of self-forgiveness. But look at what I did. Again, even in that routine way, in the same day, I'm beating myself up. I'm not, in the present. And
Right.
that's where self-awareness is so key, to be able to catch yourself and continue to work at that. So, I mean, there's more to it, but I feel like I should stop there for a little
Well, I
bit.
think you bring up a good point because just before we started recording, we had a very short conversation. And I was trying to explain, I have fallen back into a couple of bad habits over the last week or two because I have some stressful stuff going on in my life. And I'm not as kind to myself when I speak of myself in the last couple of weeks because I have fallen into that old habit. And it's not that I'm not aware, it's not that I don't know, because I do. I work in this space. I work in mental health. I have an education in mental health. I do the podcast and my business. But sometimes life interrupts our patterns and we fall into old habits, and we just need the reminder, which you gracefully gave me a few minutes ago, to just be a little kinder and understand that we are human. And at some point, we're all going to have those stumbling blocks. But if we can be aware of them, if we can consciously understand, you know what, something happened, it wasn't ideal, but we can move forward and do better next time. I think that's such a great lesson for everyone because we're all in the same position at some point or another.
Yeah, and some of this is kind of that cousin to gratitude, where you have to be really proactive about being positive, so that you can replace whatever you're doing that you are being hard on yourself about, with some affirmations, and accept those affirmations at the same time. And the same thing goes with, on the other side of the coin, with like worrying. So let's say that you worry. Let's say I'm worrying, and I just, have that negative energy, and I call my friends up, and I call Crystal up, and I say, Crystal, what do I do? This is gonna, and you're a good friend. You're just going to hear me out. But then that thing that I was worried about never happens. And then you have to do the 2020, be like, what did I do to myself? Wait, what did I do to my friends? I mean, my friends are there to, friends are there to support one another
Sure.
when you're dealing with the real. But now you've imposed that negativity on others because you weren't really managing yourself. So by doing that and reminding yourself that you got it wrong, helps you the next time that you find yourself worrying, to stop.
I
So
love
these are
that.
just the things that you need to do to, we're all work in progress. And, these are just some of the techniques that I've always found have served me well, and then I want to continue to keep sharing.
I love that. And we all are all, regardless of where we are in life, a work in progress. One of my favorite quotes is, "We are both a disaster and a masterpiece all at the same time." And we are. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm enjoying your courses so much, is because they are a consistent reminder of, yes, you are human, but you can become aware of these things and be a little more conscious of patterns and try to make those changes that you're looking to make. So, while we're on the subject, do you want to tell people who are listening how they can find you if they want to check out your courses or your book or your podcast?
Sure. Well, try to make it as easy as possible. My website is mattzinman.com, and that's your portal to everything, including the podcast and finding the books, and, well, book for now, and the courses. So, yeah, I mean, I'm easy to find. Thank you.
Perfect. And I will put the website in the show notes for the podcast episode. So if you're listening to this, you can go to the show notes and click on the website and be able to find Matt that way. And you did sort of mention books with an
Yeah.
S. So do you
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about sort of what you're working on now?
Yeah, you are the first to hear about this work in progress, but I do have a second book that also happened in somewhat of an unplanned way, that evolved through this whole concept of happiness, which we are about, a good ways into describing. And the working title is Finding Happiness: The Shortest Path to a Happier Life. And it is these mindset techniques that I do believe is that key, that if you apply self-kindness, if you look to earn confidence, both of which really kind of rely on that, like, undeniable logic,
Right.
So you, in a way, you're outsmarting yourself. So that number, even those two things by themselves, those techniques plus self-awareness to catch yourself when, if I come up here and the day-to-day routine stuff, as opposed to the other two really working on the big stuff, so that you can stay present. And then once you're present, talking about happiness in and into itself, that optimism, that extreme optimism, that striving to make the best of every situation. But that's also reactive. That's as you as earned confidence gets you in the position to deal with the real. Now, how do you deal with the real? So
Right.
that's your reflex of positivity with happiness. But the other side of that, of course, is what you do proactively in the present now that you're there. And of course, that brings us into mindfulness in terms of your external awareness and gratitude, of course. And then energy really kind of flows into that as well. So those different concepts, they add up to 7, are really what that book Happiness is going to be about. And it also will, of course, reiterate the fundamental concepts, many of which what I just described is also part of Zism. So it's kind of a Zisms 2.0 in a way. And that's the goal.
I love it. And I love that as someone who has struggled through depression, you are a great example to people of this thing doesn't have to define you and you can create the life that you want. And for everyone, that's different. Being someone who has the education I have, I know for some people that means medication for life. I know for some people it's medication temporarily to interrupt a cycle. For other people, it's just working on their mindset. It's creating a life that has abundance. It's finding support systems that can help them get through the hard times. So I love that you're this wonderful example for people of it doesn't matter sort of where you are in your life. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what you struggle with. You can create different. You can be different. And you have done this, a good chunk of it, through the midst of COVID chaos, which I think speaks volumes because for those of us listening, we know how we've struggled through COVID. So, having to create all of these things, having to build community during COVID, just almost seems overwhelming in some ways. Now, because I've also done it personally, I can speak to my own personal experience, but I can't fathom what it would be like to create a book, start writing a second book, have a business that literally stopped because of COVID. Have you at all in the last 12 months as you've been going through this, have you taken a step back to just sit in the oh my God, look what I've accomplished kind of moment?
Honestly, not really. And I guess part of that is because, I mean, fortunately, my wife Erica and I have a different business with the nonprofit, falling, to the sidelines, as it were, side burner, whatever you want to call it, that we're okay. And that makes it easier. That's really what also gave me the freedom to write the book in the first place, thankfully. So I'm certainly very grateful for that. And at the same time, all, books aren't, they're not going to, pay your mortgage for them.
Sure.
Very, very rarely do they do that. And no different in my case. And so, developing the courses, I'm really just kind of coming online. And so I really certainly, I feel like I feel like I'm still unfinished in terms of what I'm working toward and building out, everything described. If it's okay, Crystal, I'd love to stay on topic on the depression
Sure.
for a few,
Yeah.
uh, because I know it's very close to my heart. And on Clubhouse, I founded the Defeating Depression Club,
Right.
as well as the Happiness Mindset Club, and they run opposite times. I do believe that I've defeated depression, and one of the ways that I advocate people do that, and I am on medication. My dad was bipolar, my mom was a depressive. I didn't get the best gene pool. So my brother, and I lost my brother in 2012 as well. I certainly take it very seriously, and I've been quite low at times. But not since 2013, which was right after, in part, a lot was happening then, but certainly losing him was attributed to that episode.
Sure.
But I basically now have this 3-day rule. And what I know of myself is that first of all, as an entrepreneur, you're going to get kicked one place or another, any number of times a week, let alone, day, and you're going to have a down day for whatever reason otherwise. But if I get to a third day, I really just parent myself, and I don't give myself a choice to do a number of things, and a number of things I won't let myself do. So I won't let myself lay around. I won't let myself just continue to wallow as well, which, you get that tendency. I have to create structure. I have to do something physical. I have to reach out to people who lift me up. I have some really good friends, and not like, like they have to talk me down on day 3. I just know that that's going to lift me up. Just reaching
Right.
out, having those conversations. And I think a lot of people, to your point, in and around COVID and the lockdowns, do have, there's an epidemic, even a pandemic of environmental depression. And these are the things that are out there. And so it was really important to me, for those who go to my website, and I know you had me mention it already, but if it's okay, it's mattzinman.com. Under Z-isms is a section on mood health. And there's an episode of my podcast that I talk about it. I also did one with a doctor from National Institute of Mental Health about suicide and how do you talk to your kids about suicide. And there's a short video there about suicide. And mainly, there's a free resource called the Depression Defeater. And it's a download that basically is that contingency plan, so that when you get to a day 3, it's like, in case of depression, break glass, and follow this plan that you customize for yourself. And naturally, the whole goal is to make a difference, and that's something that I think people can find very helpful. So that's why that resource now exists for free, and I continue to build on it. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers the depression side. I wanted to.
I love that
Yes.
you brought that up because I think, and you and I have talked briefly about this previously, I think over the next couple of years, we as a society, especially here in North America, I don't know so much about in other places in the world, but I imagine the same will be true. We are going to be dealing with a mental health crisis and the after effects of this whole COVID thing, because I don't think we've had the ability so far to take a step back because we're still in the midst of it and really think about how it's affected people's mental health of all ages, what it's done to people from a mental health standpoint. And so I think we will, in some way, shape, or form, for maybe 3 to 5 years, probably be dealing with the aftermath of that. And I think there's a lot of people who have environmental depression right now simply because we
Yeah.
have been in lockdown. We haven't been able to visit friends and family. We haven't been able to hug our parents or, our friends, or even, do the simple stuff like go to the movies or have a cup of coffee with someone. And I don't think people yet are at the place where they have recognized how much of an impact that has had on them. But I think it's slowly coming. And I'm seeing it with my clients, I'm seeing it with my friends and family. It is slowly coming. And so having a resource like yours, having people like you who are out there talking about depression, so that those people who maybe don't necessarily need the medication, but they need resources to know what to do to get to the other side.
Right.
Or people maybe even who are on medication don't know how to get to the other side because the resources they had have been taken away because of COVID. There's also been a lot of that. So having something for people to refer to, having a place for people to go, for people who have Clubhouse and can join your conversations, those sorts of resources are a great place. And people who listen to this podcast have heard me talk about Clubhouse before, but it's one of the reasons why I love the platform so much. You can go to a room, you can have a conversation with someone like yourself, and there can be professionals who work in the mental health field, but there can be, just dads who are struggling to be dads in the midst of all of this. And you get this, sort of worldly view of how everyone is struggling with the same things. But we can collectively, even if we don't know each other personally, come together and be supportive of each other as a race, as a human race, versus just, my neighbor down the street. And that's the only person I care about. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And I appreciate what you're doing to bring awareness to something like this, because I think, especially from a standpoint of men talking about it, it's not happening enough. And
Right.
men are struggling with mental health just as much as women. In fact, I would venture to say at this point, the research is going to start to show us that men struggle more because they don't think they can talk about it the way women can. And so I appreciate that you're trying to bring that to the table. And I think it's beneficial for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Hearing what you just described, raises a few other points I think fill in some gaps. Working backwards, there's another advocate you may know on Clubhouse named Sophia May, who's a UK,
Yep.
#1 Billboard pop artist who, has also shifted gears, a mental health nurse, and she runs another mental health club, and she also has something they're working on called Mendable, which is, for men helping men, and just helping to be supportive to one another. I think is really cool. I know that's in progress. And you're right, Crystal. The male suicide rates at least twice as much as women. I think that one of the things that's always helped me, even when I get to those depths of despair and really sink, it's like quicksand. That's why the 3-day rule is so important, because if you get
Right.
past 3, you're up to your knees, and then it gets harder, and it almost takes twice as
Sure.
long to get out. And that's why I've set that line for myself. Things won't always be this way. Things will be better at some point. You may not have the answer. You're going to feel like crap. You may get worse before you get better. But the reality, knowing from your own life experience, back to earn confidence, is that it won't last.
Right.
This too shall pass. And the other thing I do think that has come out of the pandemic, which is actually a positive, is telehealth. And I think that the barrier that had existed, and it still does to a little bit of a degree, but to go and find that other doctor, and go lie on the proverbial couch, just the whole stigma of it, creates that barrier. And I agree, in particular for men, but it's hard to get an appointment, right? So you're feeling cruddy now,
Right.
and how much longer do you have to wait to make that happen? But with telehealth, there are now those services out there that you literally can just get online and have a professional do an intake and really give you some guidance to help you understand where you are. And it might just be that one time thing, but at least you can do it in private and have the benefit of access to that, which I don't think was in mass access before.
I love that. So here in Canada, we have something called telehealth that is basically calling a nurse to find out whether or not your symptoms require you to go to a hospital, whether you can go to urgent care, whether or not you can set up a virtual appointment, those sorts of things. We've had that here for a long time. So it's a surprise to me that you all didn't have it in the United States before now. And I'm super glad that you do, because it's a wonderful resource. Especially, I know our healthcare system is very different than what you guys have, but I think right now, especially because people are afraid to leave their homes, they are afraid to go to a hospital, they are afraid to go to an
Right.
urgent care clinic. And so, if you can pick up a phone and talk to a professional to get referred to who you need to, or whatever the circumstances are, I think that opens up a whole new field for people to be able to reach out when they need it. So, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, no, of course. I know we both agree doesn't get much more of an important topic than that. So thank you.
Awesome. So I do want to be respectful of your time. And typically, I will end podcasts by asking the people that I'm speaking to 4 questions. Are you up for answering a few?
Sure. Well, it's your time too, of course. Um, I would like to mention the the one thing about energy, because
Yeah,
that is the
sure.
last component. Again, I just want to review: self-kindness, draw the line in the sand, leave your past baggage and negativity behind; self-awareness, to catch yourself, all across the board; earned confidence, to know that you can just deal with the real.
Which is huge.
Huge. Happiness, of course, umbrellas it all, but at its core is that reflex. You can choose to, strive to make the best of every situation. And then proactively, once you're in the present, you're dealing with mindfulness. Again, externally, as opposed to that self-awareness, then you're dealing with gratitude and energy. And I think energy awareness is essential. and you're looking at it both personal and interpersonal, and actually more than both, universal, right? So as an entrepreneur, the one thing I'll say, it's more from a practical standpoint, is I really look to energy, my own energy, as a currency versus time, so that I know when I'm at my best, um, I would do my writing. I might do my finances, the things that are going
Sure.
to take more mental acuity, as opposed to, I can't write a cohesive sentence. It's, let's go do laundry. It still
Right.
has to get done. So that's personal. I think interpersonal is really important because it's easy to lose sight of the fact that we all affect one another. And number one, bringing your bad mood to other people, but also, getting caught off guard by others who may not be responsible about their own bad mood. And those sorts of things, again, coming back to, mindfulness in that regard, so that you are paying attention to other people's energy. And maybe unbeknownst to them, they need a little cheering up, and you can make a conscious effort to do that. And universal is a very, very different, much broader topic that I think, could be a whole podcast, obviously, and then some.
Sure.
But I think people are familiar with law of attraction and gratitude applications and things. So that's where that goes. But, you can't really address, the full breadth of happiness without overlaying the energy component.
It's a huge component, and I think you're right. It could be like a whole podcast episode all on its own. And so for anyone who is listening and they want to learn more, hop on Matt's website. As I said, I'll put it in the show notes. Reach out to Matt, whether it be on social media, Clubhouse, email, through his website, whatever, if you're looking to learn more about that, because it's a fascinating topic for those who don't know much about it. um, Life sort of falls into place as you learn about energy and energy exchange and all of that, the universal laws of attraction. And just this week, I'm learning about gene keys. And, as you go through all of that, sort of things fall into place and you have those sort of realizations about your life and your purpose and all of that fun stuff. So, yeah, I will put the link to Matt's website in the show notes, and you
All
guys can
right.
reach out and get some more information if you're looking to get that.
All
Okay.
right, Crystal, I'm ready for the hot seat.
Okay.
What do you have for me?
So the first question is, if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, what time frame would you go back to, and what's the advice you would give yourself?
Hmm. Well, I was a single parent for a lot. It's just the first thing that comes to my mind, obviously. But I was a single parent for a lot of years, and my son's 20 now, and um, I don't think I said to him enough, "Go figure it out." I think I did too much for him, and I think he's paying the price for it now in terms of
Wow.
his life skills. So, from a parenting standpoint, I would tell my younger dad to be harder, even, and I think part of it is because he's an only and a child of divorce, and there was a little bit of that whole dynamic.
Sure.
But I do think that it's very important whenever possible to tell your children to go figure it out themselves.
Wow, I love that. And I find it interesting. So I'm not a parent myself, but I do have pretty much everyone I know in my life who is a parent, and I am from a very large family. So I spent most of my life raising children. And it's interesting because I think probably most parents I talk to in some way, shape, or form have those sort of moments as a parent. I wish I had, 20 years later, so that you had a better life. Like, it has nothing to do with you as a parent. It has to do with what you're seeing your child go through later in life. And you have those moments. I think it's fantastic that you brought that up, because far too often, I don't think as parents, we sit down and chat about those sorts of things. So thank you. I appreciate that. I think the parenting conversation and how parents struggle and what they wish they had done differently so that other parents can learn from it. I think that's a fabulous thing. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
So the
sounds
next
like a clubhouse room.
it right. I find that every day now. I find I'm like, ooh, could this be a
I think
clubhouse
it's a
room?
good
I think it
theme.
should be,
Yeah,
right?
I know they're stocking up. All right,
Okay, next question. What's the one thing about yourself that you want to work on?
my morning routine.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, I fall in and out of it. I'd like to be more consistent. It's challenging because I can't always go to bed at the same time. I play ice hockey, so the nighttime slots are very late, as I'm sure many Canadians, are familiar
Yep.
with. I played a lot in Canada growing up. But I have
Yes,
a game tonight. It starts at 9:30. So,
oh,
it's hard to get yourself in a 9:30 game, come back, all pumped up from playing and be able to get to sleep to get up in the morning and do the routine. But I'm really trying to, block my time better. But like I said, we're all a work in progress, and I struggle just the same with it. And that's my current focus right now to do.
I love that. Routine is definitely difficult, especially when you play a sport like hockey. Yeah, I think when you have anything like that that's a little open ended late at night, it can be really hard to sort of settle into something routine wise. So, okay, next question is what's the best or the worst piece of advice you've ever been given?
Can I go to the next question and come back to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to pass for the moment and let it marinate for me, and I'll come back with an answer.
Okay, so the next question is what does happiness mean to you?
Happiness to me is being aligned with my purpose, and having, freedom in life, and certainly, the obvious things that go with it, being healthy, and,
Sure.
being okay. I mean, freedom and, financial go hand in hand. But I don't I think working to and achieving freedom makes happiness that much more, possible.
I
So,
love that. That's a great answer. And if you can't think of an answer to the best or worst piece of advice, that's okay. We can totally skip that one.
yeah, I can't think of, well, what did somebody tell me? I don't. Somebody asked me recently, talk about your mentors, and I've had a lot of mentors throughout my life, throughout my career, and
Sure.
maybe it's a pandemic thing, or I've been head down or whatever. One person comes to mind right now, but when the question came up, it was like, I don't really, I'm not really, you don't have any mentors. I'm like, whoa, I'm coming up blank on this answer. But in the moment, I don't know. I really don't know. Best or worst advice.
I
I'm gonna
think that's
pass.
great, actually. It's interesting because when I ask this question, I think it speaks volumes about sort of where people are in their current moment. If you're struggling, you tend to lean towards the worst piece of advice you've ever been given. If you're doing really well, it's like the best piece of advice because it's right at the top of your head. And then there are people who they're kind of really not sure what would be the best or the worst, like yourself. And I think a lot of that has to do with all of the advice you are given is great in some way, shape, or form, depending on your mindset, because you learn something from it and we take something away from it all. So I actually kind of love that you don't have an answer to that question.
I'm gonna give an answer anyway now. I just thought of
Okay.
something. It's funny, you give me enough time. It's a layup, which is to say, I ride a motorcycle, and there were, here in Pennsylvania, we don't have a helmet law. You can ride
Oh my
without.
gosh.
And I mean, I just ride on the backcountry roads or whatever, but it's not really about me. It's about anybody else, even in a one lane country road. And I have kids. I'm now remarried, step kids, and my wife. And I just feel a greater sense of responsibility. So wear a helmet. I'll just go with that.
That's a great piece of advice. And I had no idea, maybe because, I'm a little sheltered, but I had no idea there were places you could ride without a helmet because you can't do that here.
Wow. Yeah, there are a lot of places, and it's part of the somewhat about the riding culture, about freedom. Again, being such a huge part of it, and being able to do that. I was not aware that Canada had a helmet law. But
Yes.
when you think of like Ben Roethlisberger, remember like years back,
Yep.
the Steelers quarterback, really banged himself up. So
Yeah.
there's good reason to wear a helmet. Now I sound like a dad, but that's okay. I am one.
Exactly. You are a dad. It's okay. And I think we as a society are becoming far more aware of what head injuries do to people, regardless of what the circumstances, whether it's playing sports, whether it's riding, whatever it happens to be. So even, like an actual bicycle, there is a law here that you have to be wearing a helmet if you're under a certain age for those reasons. So yeah, I think that's great advice for
Thank
everyone.
you.
Like just wear a helmet, be safe, put on your seatbelt, do those sorts of
Yeah.
things,
I
right?
wanted to come through. on your question. That's all I'll say. I wouldn't have beaten myself up later. I wouldn't let that happen, but I would have wanted to give you an answer. So I feel a little better.
You are awesome. I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. Do you have any final words that you want to share with the Chasing Happiness community?
Be nothing less than kind to yourself.
Oh, perfect. I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for joining me today, Matt. I hope you have an absolutely amazing week, and I appreciate your time.
I'll make sure I do. Thank you, Crystal. Always a
Thank
pleasure to be
you.
with you. So appreciate you.
Thank you.